Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Irene the Educator. I took a break, did a few sketches, and came up with this short video. Hopefully, you enjoy it. The caricatures were made using the circles and squares application on the Pages app. The slave is actually from a painting that I did. So, Martin Luther King, Dave Chappelle, Jerry Falwell, Kanye, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, Wendy Williams, Cardi B, Taylor Swift were all done using the circles and square application. So hopefully you enjoy this. After the disclaimer, watch the video.
Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community.
As you can see, Malcolm nailed it. Just because they are talented entertainers does not mean they should be leaders in any community. If you think back to the legacy of 2009 in the Video Music Awards, this happened.
Yo, I'm happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all times. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? God said keep it.
You mean the cockroach coming? Ah!
Oh, well, I thought that Kim was still married to the other guy and pregnant by West at the same time.
Correct.
Yo, know what I'm saying? Harriet Tubman never freed the slaves.
Just wondering where all these we will not tolerate hate advocates are for these clowns who are hating and killing black women.
Yo, check it out. 400 years of slavery was a choice. Hold on a minute, bro. Now, I know you're about to Back to the Future a Will Smith slap. But just know that he's just mouthing off until they shut him down. Now, think about it for a minute. It's not like we own newspapers or stations or anything like that to get our point across. No, Ninja. Getting abused and used by the KKK was not a choice. However, that marriage to KK and then getting used and abused was perhaps a choice, Ninja. 'Cause Ninja, I know you saw that video.
Now, the scriptures in Proverbs 6:26. Now, the scriptures are clear, and this is backed by the moral majority. For by means of a whorish woman, a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for that precious life. That is right, friends, for that precious life.
First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly, affects all indirectly.
International level, when you and I want just a little bit of freedom, we're supposed to be nonviolent. They're violent. They're violent in Korea. They're violent in Germany. They're violent in the South Pacific. They're violent in Cuba. They're violent wherever they go. But when it comes time for you and me to protect ourselves against lynchers, they tell us to be nonviolent. That's a shame, because we get tricked into being nonviolent. And when somebody stands up and talks like I just did, they say, well, he's advocating violence. Isn't that what they say? Every time you pick up your newspaper, you hear where one of these things has written into it that I'm advocating violence, and I have never advocated any violence. Isn't that what they say? Every time you pick up your newspaper, you hear where one of these things has written into it that I'm advocating violence, and I have never advocated any violence. I've only said that black people who are the victims of organized violence perpetrated upon us by the Klan, the Citizens Council, and many other forms, we should defend ourselves. And when I say that we should defend ourselves against the violence of others, they use their press skillfully to make the world think that I'm calling on violence, period. And I wouldn't call on anybody to be violent without a cause. The gas oven is already built before you realize that they're hot. One of the shrewd ways that they use the press to project us in the eye or image of a criminal, they take statistics, and with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public, because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side. And whether it's the local government, state government, federal government. So they use the press to create images. And at the local level, they'll create an image by feeding statistics to the press, through the press, showing the high crime rate in the Negro community. And as soon as this high crime rate is emphasized through the press, then people begin to look upon the Negro community as a community of criminals. And then any Negro in the community can be stopped in the street, put your hands up, and they pat you down. You might be a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, or some other kind of Uncle Tom. And but despite your professional standing, you'll find that you're the same victim as the man who's in the alley, just because you're black and you live in a black community which has been projected as a community of criminals. This is done. And once the public accepts this image also, it paves the way for a police state type activity in the Negro community. They can use any kind of brutal method to suppress blacks because they're criminals anyway. And what has given this image? The press. So now, what effect does this have on us? Why should the black man in America concern himself, since we've been away from the African continent for 400 years, 300 or 400 years? Why should we concern ourselves? What impact does what happened to them have upon us? Number one, first you have to realize that up until 1959, Africa was dominated by the colonial powers, and by the colonial powers of Europe having complete control over Africa, they projected the image of Africa negatively. They projected Africa always in a negative light. Jungles, savages, cannibals, nothing civilized. And naturally, it was so negative until it was negative to you and me. And you and I began to hate it. We didn't want anybody to tell us anything about Africa, much less call us an African. And in hating Africa and hating the African, we ended up even hating ourselves without even realizing it. Because you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origin and not end up hating yourself. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. And you show me one of these people over here who have been thoroughly brainwashed, who has a negative attitude toward Africa, and I'll show you one that has a negative attitude toward himself. You can't have a negative attitude toward yourself, a positive attitude toward yourself, and a negative attitude toward Africa at the same time. To the same degree that your attitude, that your understanding of, an attitude toward Africa becomes positive, you will find that your understanding of and your attitude toward yourself will also become positive. Where our food, clothing, and shelter was concerned, and our education was concerned, we turned to the man. We never thought in terms of bringing these things into existence for ourselves. We never thought in terms of doing things for ourselves because we felt helpless. And what made us feel helpless was our hatred for ourselves. And our hatred for ourselves stemmed from our hatred of things African. Long about 1955, they had the Bandung Conference in Indonesia. And at that time, the Africans, the Asians, the Arabs, all of the non-white people got together and agreed to de-emphasize their differences and emphasize what they had in common and form a working unity. And it was the working unity, the spirit of Bandung, created a working unity that made it possible for the Asians who were oppressed, the Africans who were oppressed, and others who were oppressed to work together toward getting independence for these other people. And it was the spirit of Bandung that brought into existence this working unity that made it possible for nations that didn't have a chance to become independent, they did come into their independence. And most of this began along in 1959. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community